Hi everyone, my name is Barbara Vance. Thank you so much for joining me for this lesson on just some general guidelines that will help you name the characters in your stories. I've had so many students put a great deal of pressure on themselves for coming up with that perfect character name, and I'm hoping that some of these general guidelines will help you along the way, as well as ease some of the tension that you might have over this process. Now, this is a part of a larger course I have on writing character names, so if you enjoy this lesson, I recommend clicking on the link in the description box below. That's going to take you over to the full course, which does come complete with downloadable resources that will help you put things into practice right away. I thank you so much for watching. Let's dive into the video. The first thing that I want you to remember is that you can always change your character's name. Until you hit publish, you may change your character's name. And I say this because a lot of writers really get hung up on the character name and they don't push forward with the plot because they think they need to have that character name solidified. But the truth is actually that just putting a placeholder name in there and just pressing on with the actual writing of your narrative will most often help you come up with your character name, because you will get to know your character better and you'll have more decisive opinions about what their name should be. An example of this would be Gone with the Wind. Scarlett O'Hara, her name throughout most of the time that was being written by Margaret Mitchell was actually Pansy, was her name. And if you know that story, you know that the name Pansy doesn't even remotely begin to suit the character who is Scarlett O'Hara. So that was something that Margaret Mitchell just put that name in there and just went with it until she wrote the narrative, and then she kind of went back and said, okay, now what's a stronger name for this character? So please don't get hung up on character name when you're plotting out your story. Get in there and start writing it knowing that I'm going to get to know this character better, and when I do, I will have a better sense of what I want that name to be. My next sort of general piece of advice and guidelines as we go through these is try the name on for size. So many writers will name a character and then they'll be very conflicted if it's the right name. But I will tell you that very often you need to let a name settle in. So a name might not feel quite like the right name initially, but it grows on you as you use it and as you consider that name being said in a variety of situations. One thing that they often tell parents to be when they're considering names for their children is actually to imagine saying that name in a variety of situations and sort of say the name. So imagine scolding your child saying that name, or calling to your child across the playground with that name. And as you do that, you find, no, I'm actually tired of that name. That name hasn't worn well on me as I've practiced saying it. And so when you're thinking about your names, if you have a name and you're on the fence about it, then go on a walk, or as you're driving, in those little spaces of time in your day, think about that name and imagine people, characters in the book saying that person's name in a variety of situations, and see how the name wears on you, because you might find very well that you will get tired of some names, and other names you will say, no, that is actually just quite what I wanted. So definitely do that. It's one of my most recommended tips. Also, keep in mind associations people might have with the name. So biblical names or historical names. If you name your character Winston, some people might think of Winston Churchill in that situation. If you name your child David, that has a very strong religious connotation. Does that mean that you can't name your character David because it's a biblical name? Not at all, not at all. But you want to consider how different people will respond to that name and the associations they might already have with that name. So you don't want to totally rule your story by what people might be thinking about your character, but it can be something that you would really want to consider and think about, particularly for names that might stand out. Also, consider initials. So you'd I had a student once who their character's initials ended up being KKK, and that didn't work out so well. I had another student once whose characters ended up being ASS, and that did not work out so well. So think about just, okay, when I put these initials together, is this going to be problematic in any way? It's a small thing, but something that you should think about. Also, I have to say, one of the best things, I'm giving you all these great tips right up front. One of the best things that you can do to help choose a character name is really broaden your horizons. Be interested in a lot of things. Be interested in people, places, history, art, music. That really is going to inspire you, not just because you will say to yourself, well, I didn't know the name Leonardo existed or something. But rather because if you're watching this, you probably very much do want to choose purposeful names, which is a great thing. And so the more you have experience in a lot of disciplines, the breadth you have to choosing that name and the sophistication you will be able to bring to that name choice. So those are general guidelines that I'd like you to keep in your head as we go through this course. Now, last thing I will say, do keep a journal of names that you come across. You can keep it in a note on your phone. That's often what I do. I just sort of open up a note, and every time I think of a name that might be a possibility, I just jot it down there. Just don't let your names get away from you. Don't just write them on slips of paper here and there and everywhere, because you probably won't be able to keep those all in one place. And then you'll say, oh, drat, I know I put that name down somewhere, but I can't quite remember where I put it down. And now it's lost. So I highly recommend keeping a journal of names. I also definitely recommend keeping a pad of paper or something by your bed, because in the middle of the night, it is not uncommon to have an idea, character, plot, or otherwise pop into your brain, and you don't want to forget it. So having some paper there that you can jot it down is a great thing to do.